The millionaire's baby kicked and punched every nanny. But Kissed, the black cleaner, blood dripped from the nanny's nose as she stumbled backward, tears mixing with the crimson stream flowing down her face. The tiny fist that had just connected with her face belonged to a 17-month-old baby boy who seemed possessed by something far darker than typical toddler tantrums. "That's the 7th one this month," someone whispered from the doorway, and it was the terror in that simple statement that should have warned them all. Because what happened next would expose a conspiracy so twisted that Boston's wealthiest would never speak openly about it again. But the real shock? It would be a minimum-wage cleaning woman who would bring their entire empire crashing down. "Get that woman out of my sight." Eleanor Ashworth's voice cracked like a whip through the mansion's grand foyer. Her diamond-encrusted fingers pointed accusingly at Linda Morrison, who stood frozen in the center of the chaos, somehow managing to hold little Liam in her arms without a single cry or struggle from the notorious terror. "I will not have some nobody from the streets contaminating my grandson with God knows what filth." Linda Morrison, 32 years old, daughter of a single mother who cleaned these same Boston brownstones 40 years ago, stood perfectly still. The baby in her arms, Liam Ashworth Crawford, the child who had sent 19 professional nannies to the emergency room in 8 months, rested his curly head against her shoulder. His little hands, those same weapons that had drawn blood from trained childcare specialists, were gently wrapped around her neck. He was peaceful. He was safe. He was finally, impossibly, calm. "Mother's absolutely right, Nicholas." Catherine Ashworth swept into the room, her Hermes scarf billowing dramatically behind her. "You cannot possibly be considering letting the cleaning staff handle Liam. What will the country club think? What will the country club investors say? We have a reputation to maintain." The Beacon Hill mansion practically vibrated with tension. 19 nannies. 19 highly qualified, extensively vetted, astronomically expensive nannies had been viciously attacked by this beautiful baby boy. Liam had bitten, kicked, scratched, and headbutted his way through the finest childcare professionals money could buy. His father, Nicholas Crawford, the 38-year-old tech billionaire who had revolutionized cloud computing, was at his wits' end. But there stood Linda, the night cleaning woman who had been called in for an emergency shift during daytime hours, holding that impossible child like it was the most natural thing in the world. "She must be drugging him," Eleanor hissed, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear perfectly. These people always have some sort of ghetto tricks up their sleeves. Probably something her mother taught her from the projects. Linda felt each word like a physical blow, but her face remained serene. Growing up in Roxbury, the daughter of a woman who scrubbed toilets for Boston's elite while fighting lupus, Linda had developed armor against this particular brand of venom. Her dark eyes met Nicholas Crawford's troubled gaze, and she saw something there that gave her courage. Confusion? Yes. But also a desperate hope. "Perhaps I should leave," Linda said softly, her voice carrying a subtle strength that made several people in the room unconsciously lean forward. "I'll just put Liam down in his crib." The moment she began to transfer the baby, Liam's eyes shot open. He let out a piercing wail and his little arms reached desperately for Linda, tiny fingers clutching at her uniform, refusing to let go. For the first time in 8 months, Liam Ashworth Crawford was showing genuine attachment to another human being. Extraordinary. Dr. Sarah Chen, the family's pediatrician, breathed in amazement. She stepped closer, her medical bag forgotten in her hand. "In 15 years of pediatric practice, I've never witnessed such an immediate and profound bond. It's as though he recognizes something authentic in her presence." "Recognizes what?" Eleanor spat, her face flushing an ugly shade of red. "She's a cleaning woman. She scrubs toilets for a living. There's nothing for my grandson to recognize." But Linda caught the flicker of understanding in Dr. Chen's intelligent eyes. The doctor had realized what Linda had always known, what her mother had taught her on those long nights when they both came home exhausted from cleaning the homes of people who looked right through them. Children are truth-tellers. They sense genuine energy in ways that adults, corrupted by prejudice and social conditioning, have long forgotten. "Mr. Crawford," Linda said, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel that made Eleanor's eyes narrow dangerously. "May I make a proposal?" Nicholas nodded slowly, captivated by the quiet confidence radiating from this woman who society said should be invisible. Let me stay with Liam for 2 hours. Just 2 hours. If he remains calm, if he continues to respond positively to my care, then perhaps you might consider that the problem isn't with the nannies. Perhaps the problem is with whoever has been selecting them. The silence that crashed through the room was deafening. Eleanor went pale, then red, then pale again. Catherine's mouth fell open in shock, her expensive lipstick suddenly looking garish in her fury. And Nicholas Crawford found himself staring at this cleaning woman with the dawning realization that he had just witnessed something far more significant than a simple offer to babysit. While everyone processed Linda's loaded words, she maintained the serene expression that only comes from weathering far worse storms and emerging stronger. Her eyes held a quiet power that made some of those present understand, perhaps for the first time, that they had catastrophically underestimated this woman. If you're wondering how a cleaning woman making $14 an hour had the audacity to challenge Boston's most powerful family, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Because what happened in the next few hours didn't just change lives, it shattered them and rebuilt them into something no one saw coming. The 2 hours Linda proposed became a silent war of wills that threatened to tear the household apart. Eleanor Ashworth couldn't stomach watching her blue-blooded grandson show affection for a working-class black woman. Catherine circled the nursery like a shark, searching for any microscopic excuse to expel this interloper from their sacred family domain. Meanwhile, Linda sat on the floor with Liam, playing with wooden blocks, reading picture books, and singing soft lullabies that made the 17-month-old giggle with pure joy. "Nicholas, you cannot seriously be entertaining this madness," Eleanor whispered viciously, though her stage whisper carried through 3 rooms. "Imagine the humiliation at the symphony fundraiser. Imagine what Constance Pemberton will say when she hears we've hired the cleaning staff as our nanny." Linda pretended not to hear, but every syllable carved itself into her memory. She'd been here before. Since childhood in Roxbury, she'd learned that her very existence bothered people like Eleanor. Her mother used to say, "Baby girl, they're going to try to convince you that you don't belong anywhere. You prove them wrong by being so excellent they can't ignore you." And Linda had been excellent. She'd earned a bachelor's degree in early childhood education on a full scholarship from Boston University. She'd worked in elite daycare centers in Back Bay and Beacon Hill, where mothers praised her privately but never quite managed to learn her name. When her mother's lupus worsened and the medical bills became crushing, Linda took night cleaning jobs to pay for the experimental treatments insurance wouldn't cover. "Father, look at how docile Liam is," Catherine said, her voice dripping with suspicion. "She must have given him something. These people know methods we don't understand. Herbal things, suspicious things." Nicholas watched from the doorway, his expression a mixture of discomfort and amazement. For the first time since his wife died in childbirth 8 months ago, his son was acting like a normal, happy baby. Liam was eating his pureed carrots without throwing the bowl. He was playing without screaming. He was even allowing Linda to change his diaper, a task that typically required 3 adults to restrain him. "Perhaps we should have Liam tested," Eleanor suggested, her voice sweet as poisoned honey, "to ensure he hasn't been exposed to anything inappropriate. You know these people carry all sorts of things." Linda felt cold rage crystallize in her chest, but her face remained perfectly calm. At 32, she'd navigated subtle and overt discrimination in every job, every interview, every social interaction. She knew that showing emotion would only validate their stereotypes. "Mr. Crawford," Linda said gently, still stacking blocks with Liam, "may I ask how many specialized nannies have attempted to care for Liam over the past 8 months? 19, Nicholas replied, surprised by his own honesty. "All with impeccable credentials. Yale graduates, British trained. Experience with royal families." "And what," Linda continued, her voice soft but loaded with intention, "was the demographic profile of these 19 nannies?" Nicholas hesitated. Eleanor and Catherine exchanged nervous glances, suddenly understanding where this conversation was heading. They were. Nicholas stopped, realizing the trap. "White, wealthy, from the same exclusive social circles as your family," Linda finished. Standing up with Liam balanced on her hip, the baby laid his head on her shoulder, completely content. Interesting how a 17-month-old child can distinguish authenticity from performance, isn't it? The silence was broken only by Liam's soft breathing. Catherine's jaw worked soundlessly. Eleanor's face turned purple with indignation. "Doctor." Chen observed Linda with growing respect and fascination. "How dare you imply," Eleanor began, but Nicholas's phone erupted with an urgent ring. "Excuse me, it's the Tokyo office. Crisis situation." Nicholas left the room, leaving the women in suffocating tension. Eleanor seized her opportunity to attack. "Listen to me very carefully." Eleanor advanced on Linda like a predator. "I don't know what kind of con you're running, but I know your type. You see wealth and think you can manipulate your way into an easy life." "My type?" Linda repeated quietly, but her voice carried an edge that made Eleanor hesitate. "Please, elaborate on exactly what my type is. Don't play innocent." Catherine joined the assault. "Opportunistic, manipulative, already calculating how to seduce Nicholas and secure yourself a comfortable future." Linda smiled then. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes, but carried the weight of decades of experience with people exactly like them. "You know, you're partially correct about one thing," Linda said softly, gently rocking Liam, who was drifting towards sleep. "I am opportunistic. I'm extremely opportunistic, but not in the way your limited imagination assumes." At that moment, Nicholas returned, immediately sensing the hostile atmosphere. "Is there a problem?" "We were just getting acquainted with our guest," Eleanor said sweetly, her fake smile not reaching her cold eyes. Linda looked directly at Nicholas. "Mr. Crawford, Liam has fallen asleep in my arms. According to Dr. Chen, this is the first time in weeks. I'd like to make you an offer." Nicholas nodded, genuinely intrigued. "Hire me as a temporary nanny. 1 week. 7 days. If Liam doesn't adjust completely, if there's any sign of the previous behavioral issues, I'll leave without complaint or severance. But if he thrives, if he continues to respond positively to my care, then you need to seriously examine what's really happening in this household." Eleanor gasped. "Absolutely not, Mother," Nicholas said quietly, but his voice carried absolute authority. "When was the last time you saw Liam sleep peacefully? When was the last time he went an entire hour without screaming?" "But Nicholas," Catherine started. "1 week," Nicholas interrupted. "Linda, you're hired, temporarily. 7 days. Linda nodded professionally. "I'll need complete authority over Liam's care during those 7 days. No interference, no undermining. If you can't agree to those terms, then this won't work." "Done," Nicholas said, extending his hand. As Linda shook it, she caught Eleanor's expression of pure, murderous hatred. She knew then that this wasn't going to be a simple week of childcare. This was going to be war. What Linda didn't know yet was that Eleanor and Catherine had already started planning their counterattack, and their weapons would be far more dangerous than simple insults. The first 72 hours were a revelation. Liam transformed completely under Linda's care. The violent, inconsolable child vanished, replaced by a curious, affectionate toddler who laughed, played, and developed at a remarkable pace. Linda introduced him to age-appropriate activities, established consistent routines, and most importantly, gave him genuine emotional presence. But while Liam blossomed, Eleanor and Catherine were plotting. "We need to act decisively," Eleanor hissed during a secret meeting in Catherine's study. "That woman is worming her way into Nicholas's life. Soon she'll have complete control." "I've already contacted Marcus Reynolds," Catherine said, referring to Boston's most ruthless private investigator. "He's digging into her background. Everyone has skeletons." What they didn't know was that Linda had anticipated this move. Growing up, watching her mother be systematically destroyed by false accusations from wealthy employers, Linda had learned to document everything. She'd been recording conversations, photographing evidence, and building a case from day one. On the 4th day, Eleanor made her first obvious move. "Nicholas, I need to speak with you privately," Eleanor announced at breakfast. "It's about the nanny." In Eleanor's private sitting room, she presented a folder. "I had Linda's background investigated. For Liam's safety, you understand." Nicholas frowned, but opened the folder. "She failed to disclose a criminal record," Eleanor said triumphantly. Shoplifting. When she was 19, Nicholas read the report carefully. Mother, she was 19. She stole baby formula because her mother couldn't afford her medication and food. The charges were dismissed. She completed community service. A criminal is a criminal, Eleanor snapped. And there's more. She's been evicted twice. She has significant debt. She's clearly targeting our family for financial gain. What Eleanor didn't know was that Linda had already provided Nicholas with her complete financial history, including the medical bills from her mother's lupus treatment and the explanation for every financial hardship. Mother, Nicholas said coldly, did you actually think I hired her without a thorough background check? I know everything about Linda Morrison. Unlike the 19 nannies you and Catherine selected, who looked perfect on paper but were emotionally unavailable to my son. Eleanor's face went white. Nicholas continued, his voice harsh. I also know that you specifically requested that the nanny agencies send only candidates from appropriate backgrounds. I know you rejected 3 black candidates, 2 Latina candidates, and 1 Asian candidate, all with better credentials than the people you ultimately hired. Nicholas, you can't possibly understand. Get out of my office, Mother. And understand this. Clearly, Linda stays. Your interference ends now. But Eleanor and Catherine were far from finished. If direct attacks wouldn't work, they would try something more insidious. On day 5, Child Protective Services received an anonymous call reporting concerns about Liam's welfare. The caller described a home environment with inappropriate caregiver boundaries and suggested possible neglect. Linda was in the nursery when the social worker arrived. Miss Morrison? I'm Jessica Palmer from CPS. We've received a complaint regarding Liam Ashworth Crawford. Linda felt her heart drop but kept her composure. Of course, how can I help you? For 2 hours, Jessica Palmer interviewed Linda, examined Liam, inspected the home, and reviewed care logs. Throughout it all, Linda remained professional, answering every question honestly. Finally, Jessica closed her notebook. Miss Morrison, I'm going to be frank with you. This was a malicious report. Possibly the most obviously false complaint I've encountered in 8 years. That baby is thriving under your care. The home is immaculate. Your documentation is better than most licensed facilities. Do you know who made the report? Linda asked quietly. Jessica hesitated. I can't officially say, but the call came from a blocked number. The complaint included details about your personal background that suggested someone with access to private information, someone in the family perhaps. That night, Linda made a decision. She wasn't going to just survive this week, she was going to win. And more importantly, she was going to make sure no one else faced what she'd endured. She pulled out her laptop and began compiling everything she'd documented over the past 5 days. Every conversation she'd legally recorded, every discriminatory comment she'd witnessed, every attempt at sabotage. She also reached out to someone she'd met during her university days. Professor David Hutchinson, now a leading expert on family law and discrimination cases at Harvard Law School. Linda? Is that you? Professor Hutchinson sounded delighted. I was just thinking about you. How's life treating you? Professor, I need help. And I think I have a case that might interest you from both a legal and social justice perspective. Over the next hour, Linda explained everything. The violence, the discrimination, the systematic rejection of qualified diverse candidates, the false CPS report, and the evidence she'd been gathering. Professor Hutchinson was silent for a long moment. Linda, what you're describing is potentially a major civil rights case. If you're willing to proceed, I know several attorneys who would be very interested. But I need to ask, are you prepared for how ugly this could get? Linda thought about her mother who died 5 months ago after a lifetime of being invisible to the people whose homes she cleaned. She thought about every talented professional of color who'd been passed over because they didn't fit someone's narrow definition of appropriate. Professor, I'm not just prepared. I'm ready to burn it all down. On day 6, Eleanor and Catherine escalated dramatically. They arranged an intervention with a child psychologist named Dr. Richard Pemberton, a man known in Boston's elite circles for providing the diagnoses wealthy families needed to justify their decisions. Nicholas, we've asked Dr. Pemberton to evaluate Liam, Eleanor announced. We're concerned about his attachment to Linda. It's not natural. It might indicate deeper psychological issues. Dr. Pemberton spent 30 minutes with Liam and Linda, took notes, and requested a private conversation with Nicholas. Mr. Crawford, I have significant concerns, Dr. Pemberton began, opening his leather portfolio. Your son is forming what we call inappropriate attachments to caregivers who don't share your family's cultural and social values. This could seriously impair his ability to function in your social class. Inappropriate attachments? Nicholas repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. The nanny. Dr. Pemberton continued, carefully avoiding saying Linda's name. She comes from a vastly different background. Your son's attachment to her suggests he may be rejecting his own family's values. I recommend immediate termination of her employment and a structured reintegration program with caregivers from appropriate backgrounds. The silence that followed was interrupted by a knock on the door. Dr. Chen entered, followed by a distinguished black man in an expensive suit, and to everyone's shock, Linda. I apologize for interrupting, Dr. Chen said, her voice like ice. But as Liam's primary physician, I believe you're about to make a catastrophic mistake based on fraudulent medical advice. Eleanor went pale. What are you talking about? Linda stepped forward, carrying a thick folder. It means that during 6 days in this house, I've collected enough evidence to destroy your family's reputation, expose systematic discrimination, and potentially result in criminal charges. Professor Hutchinson introduced himself formally. I'm Professor David Hutchinson, expert witness in child welfare and discrimination cases for Massachusetts Family Court. After reviewing Miss Morrison's documentation, I can confirm we're dealing with systematic racism, conspiracy to harm a child's welfare, and several other serious violations. Catherine began to visibly sweat. Evidence? What evidence? Linda smiled that serene smile. Let's start with the 18 nannies before me. Eleanor, would you like to explain why you explicitly rejected every single candidate of color? She placed documents on the table. These are emails from your account to the nanny agencies, specifically requesting, and I quote, traditional nannies who understand our values and come from appropriate backgrounds. The agencies interpreted that correctly as racial discrimination and kept records. Dr. Pemberton began to stand, but Professor Hutchinson gestured for him to remain seated. Dr. Pemberton, you might want to stay. We have evidence of your consultation fee being tripled by Eleanor Ashworth in exchange for a predetermined diagnosis. Dr. Pemberton went pale. That's a misunderstanding. No, it's not, Linda said calmly. We have phone recordings where you discuss the diagnosis before even meeting Liam. We have bank records showing payments that would constitute bribery. Eleanor tried to speak, but Linda continued relentlessly. Catherine, shall we discuss your financial situation? The secret gambling debts, the $127,000 you've embezzled from the family charitable foundation, the forged signatures on loan documents using Liam as collateral? Nicholas stared at his sister-in-law in horror. Catherine, what is she talking about? Linda slid bank statements across the table. During my night cleaning shifts over the past 6 months, before I became Liam's nanny, I documented everything. Every carelessly discarded document, every overheard phone conversation, every piece of evidence of your systematic corruption. But the most damning evidence, Linda paused dramatically, are the recordings of you two plotting to frame me, including Catherine's attempt to plant marijuana in my cleaning supplies last week. Marijuana? Nicholas exploded. Catherine, have you lost your mind? Professor Hutchinson produced a digital recorder. Mr. Crawford, would you like to hear exactly what your mother and sister-in-law have been saying about Miss Morrison and about you over the past 6 months? For the next 30 minutes, the room filled with Eleanor and Catherine's voices. Racist slurs, detailed plans to sabotage Linda, discussions about manipulating Nicholas to gain control of his fortune, schemes to institutionalize Liam to maintain access to the family money. Every word was a nail in their coffins. My God, Nicholas whispered, his head in, and his hands. I trusted you both completely. Eleanor made one last desperate attempt. Nicholas, you can't believe this. That woman orchestrated everything. She manipulated all of us. Linda stood calmly, You're absolutely right. I did orchestrate this, but not to harm Nicholas or Liam, to protect them from you. She turned to Nicholas. Mr. Crawford, for 6 days, I watched your mother and sister-in-law systematically try to undermine your confidence as a father. I watched them reject any caregiver who actually connected with Liam because it would prove the problem wasn't him. It was the toxic environment they created. Dr. Chen spoke up. Nicholas, from a medical perspective, Linda is correct. Liam never had a behavioral disorder. He was reacting to emotional trauma and manipulation. The violence was his only way to communicate distress. Professor Hutchinson placed a final document on the table. And legally, these two women have committed serious crimes. Embezzlement, fraud, attempted bribery, conspiracy to harm a child, and racial discrimination. The district attorney would be very interested in this evidence. Catherine collapsed into tears. Eleanor, realizing she'd lost everything, attempted one final venomous attack. You think you've won? A girl from the projects with some recordings against Boston's elite? This won't end the way you think. Linda calmly pulled out her phone. Actually, Eleanor, it already has. During our conversation, I've been streaming everything live on the Massachusetts Social Justice Coalition's platform. We currently have 73,000 people watching, including reporters from the Boston Globe, the New York Times, and CNN. Eleanor's face transformed into pure horror. You didn't? I did. And do you know what's trending on Twitter right now? Number Boston elite racism. Your names. Your faces. Your words. The room erupted with the sound of phone notifications as the scandal exploded across social media in real time. Within hours, Eleanor Ashworth and Catherine became national symbols of everything wrong with America's wealthy class. Nicholas stared at Linda with a mixture of shock, admiration, and something that might have been the beginning of respect. You documented everything to protect my son. To protect Liam? Linda corrected softly. Children deserve to grow up, surrounded by authenticity and love, not manipulation and hatred. And you deserve to know the truth about the people you trusted. As Eleanor and Catherine left the mansion in disgrace, already facing a crowd of reporters and protesters outside, Linda remained calm. She had transformed two powerful women into social pariahs, using nothing but truth and intelligence they'd underestimated. But her revolution was just beginning. Because what no one in that room knew was that Linda had one final move prepared. A move that would turn her personal victory into systemic change that would protect families like Nicholas's for generations to come. 9 months later, the transformation was complete. Eleanor faced criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. Her beloved social position evaporated overnight. The country clubs expelled her. The charitable boards removed her name from buildings. Catherine filed for bankruptcy and was serving 18 months in a minimum security facility. Nicholas promoted Linda from temporary nanny to director of family services for his entire corporation, with a salary of $340,000 and equity in the company. She used her new platform to create the Morrison Foundation, which provided full scholarships for single mothers pursuing degrees in childcare and early education. Little Liam, now 2 years old, thrived spectacularly. His development exceeded every milestone. He was bilingual, curious, and most importantly, growing up in a home where love wasn't conditional on skin color or social class. Linda's story became a Harvard Business School case study on organizational justice and moral courage. Her TEDx talk on the power of documentation reached 14 million views. She published a book titled Invisible No More: How I Fought Back Against the Elite and Won, which spent 32 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. Dr. Chen became the medical director of Linda's foundation, providing free healthcare consultations to working mothers. Professor Hutchinson used the case to successfully lobby for new Massachusetts laws, protecting domestic workers from discrimination and requiring background checks on families seeking childcare, not just caregivers. Nicholas learned that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the authenticity of relationships. He and Linda eventually fell in love, married quietly, and expanded the Morrison Foundation internationally. Eleanor, isolated and abandoned by her social circle, watched from her considerably smaller apartment as the cleaning woman she'd tried to destroy became one of Boston's most influential voices for social justice. The greatest punishment wasn't legal consequences, it was irrelevance. Linda's triumph wasn't just about exposing prejudice. It was proving that intelligence, documentation, and strategic patience will always defeat arrogance and unearned privilege. She transformed her pain into purpose and her humiliation into power that uplifted thousands. Liam grew up in a home filled with genuine love, free from the toxicity that nearly destroyed him. He learned early that a person's value isn't determined by their bank account or social status but by the content of their character. The lesson resonated far beyond one family. Those who underestimate the strength of a determined woman, especially a woman, society has tried to render invisible, discover too late, the devastating power of justice served with intelligence. If this story of strategic revenge and ultimate triumph moved you, subscribe to this channel for more stories that prove the best revenge isn't anger, it's success your enemies never imagined possible. Click that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and join us for more stories where the underestimated become unstoppable. Because in the end, Linda Morrison didn't just win, she changed the entire game. And sometimes, that's the most beautiful revenge of all.